Thanks, guys, for coming. I think we're going to keep this pretty casual tonight. I am Tracy Mar, your state representative. I represent most of Darien and a little bit of Norwalk. And then we have our other state representative here.
So Tom O'Day, state representative for the 125th, which as of a few years ago includes basically from the Country Club of Darien, Mansfield Avenue, and about 300 yards on either side to New Canaan. I do have two brother-in-laws and a cousin that have been in Darien for many, many years. I love representing my sliver of Darien. I wish it was bigger, but I'm glad for you it's not. And I've been a state representative for 13 years. I'm the number 2 House Republican, so I run the floor for the House Republicans. Proud to do that. Compromise is not a 4-letter word. And I was walking in, and I said this to one or two when we first got here, but Tracy has hit the ground running. Terry Wood was one of the most liked and effective legislators, and so Tracy had big shoes to fill. I think her shoes are even bigger. Tracy's done an amazing job, and I don't say that lightly. She really has. As ranking member of Energy, which I don't know if anybody's seen their energy bill. It's been bad, but it's better because of Tracy. It's gotten better over the last year because Tracy has worked so hard on it. So I am so lucky and proud to serve with Tracy up in Hartford. And Darien and a little part of Norwalk are very lucky to have her. So I'm happy to be here and answer any questions for you all. And because we got a kind of an intimate meeting here, happy to just open up the questions or want to give a couple brief words on the highs and lows of the session?
Sure, why don't we just touch on 5002 and the budget you want to hit?
So I'll start with the budget issue. So in 2017, that was the highlight of my legislative career. We got the Republican budget passed, and then Governor Malloy vetoed it. And so we had a choice in special session to either let Hartford go bankrupt and basically blow out all of their public contracts, their union contracts, and have them start over, which would have sent a message to the rest of the cities about how they had to fix their contracts. Because the state can't declare bankruptcy, but the cities can. Or we could get our fiscal guardrails put in place, the volatility cap, spending cap, and the borrowing cap, basically taking any surpluses and paying down the debt automatically, volatility cap, having a spending cap, so basically keeping within it in essentially the rise of inflation, cost of living. And then have a borrowing cap so you can't go above a certain percentage of the income or spending. And we made a decision as a caucus, and a number of us pushed hard for it because there was a big split as to what to do, to put in these guardrails. And the fiscal guardrails have worked. Since 2017, we've had balanced budgets. And before that, we were in perpetual crisis, fiscal crisis, for 15 years before that. Well, so that was the high point. We got those fiscal guardrails put in place. We paid down record debt. We had the highest tax decrease, $600 million, 2 years ago or 4 years ago. So we've done a lot of good things. Even with all those good things, Connecticut still has the highest debt per capita. So I ask a question a lot of times, well, how many of you have borrowed $8,200 from your kids? And my answer is, well, actually, all of you have to raise your hand because we all owe $8,200 in debt that we're now going to, the next generation is going to have to pay off with us, hopefully sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, this past session, so that was a highlight of my legislative career, was getting that passed. The low light was this past session. So we basically decimated the volatility cap. What we did was, and I know Tracy and I would have voted for this if they didn't do it, but they peeled off of the volatility cap monies about 250, 300 million for this off-budget account to pay for essentially universal pre-K for everybody if you make under $100,000, you're going to have your costs all paid for childcare, which conceptually is not horrible. It's expensive. We've got other priorities we've got to think about. But what they did was they took it basically off budget and created this special fund with the volatility cap monies. So we've violated the volatility cap. And so now our highest debt per capita that we were using roughly 600 million, 300 to 600 million to pay down every year is now getting siphoned off, at least part of it, for this fund. So people on the other side of the aisle say, well, we need this special fund because if we didn't, it would go away after a period of time. We can't trust ourselves to budget in this pre-K. And my point is, well, if you can't trust yourself to do something like that, and you can't get a single Republican to vote for this scheme, then it's probably not a good idea. So that was the low point in the budget aspect of things. And I don't know if you want to do that. The housing, you know, the governor thankfully vetoed 5002. It was a mess. And so we're going to have a special session for that. We don't have a date yet, though, do we? It's mid-September?
We don't have a date yet. I think it is supposed to be mid-September. Yeah, so, I mean, looking at the housing, I think many of you probably heard some of the issues around the housing sometime about a month before we actually got the bill. We had a report that came out from this company in Oregon that looks at how many houses every town should actually be to be a fair share. And it was very clear that the majority party knew that that actually couldn't be built because they said, well, actually, you'll just have to build 25% of that because it's a pretty big number and it's not attainable. So that was one of the most egregious parts of the bill because had that been done in the town of Darien, we would probably need 10 more multifamily housing units of 350 plus. In order to get to that affordable number that was required for us. Now, the problem, I think, looking forward, and we will be going back into special session, and this will be discussed. I think there is a concern. I have a concern. Representative O'Day and I haven't exactly talked about it, but it sounds like they're wanting to put a very similar bill back in, and that's a problem. The governor has said that he's going to reach out to the municipal leaders, and I hope that is in fact the case, but we really need to have the House Republicans in the room as well because they've been working on this all along. So, and I will just say that there was more to that bill that was a problem. I mean, if you kind of go through many of the different sections, it really wasn't just that. There were issues with parking, there was issues with the affordable or the housing authorities, requiring the housing authorities to update their websites. And I talked to the Norwalk Housing Authority, and they were like, "What? You know, if I have to update my website regularly on how many houses I have available and at what cost, that changes so frequently because the cost of the housing changes when people's income changes." He was kind of saying that that was going to increase the amount of hours you're going to have someone come in to constantly assess that. I think, you know, when we're looking at bills like this and if we're truly looking at increasing affordable housing or making the cost of living better in Connecticut, we both don't think that this is the way to do it.
No, and in fact, a friend of ours who's the ranking on housing, Tony Scott, debated Jason Rojas, the majority leader, on the radio a week and a half ago, 10 days. And I give him credit, Jason Rojas credit for doing it. But he basically said, as Tracy just said, he wants to put the same bill in. He wants to pass, and he wants the governor to sign it. And so I drove around with the governor in his car when I came down to New Canaan for a visit and pointed out how 830G has failed New Canaan. I drove around with Jason Rojas through New Canaan and showed him how it failed. And I drove around with the past housing chair and showed him how and why 830G failed. And I gave him an answer on how we could fix it, which is basically giving a town a right of first refusal and then allowing the town to buy the property. If they're proposing affordable housing in an area that doesn't make any sense, you can buy that property from the proposed builder at 5% markup. And then within 8 years, build 75% of what was proposed to be affordable somewhere in town within 8 years. And if you don't, then you pay a penalty, a 5% penalty to the builder and a 5% penalty that goes to the state affordable housing fund. Now, first selectmen don't love that idea because you'd have to buy the property at a 5% premium. But the good news is you only have to then put, like, for example, if the proposal was a 100-unit complex right on the green there in the front, and 33 of those units would be affordable, or 30 would be affordable, you only have to build 25 affordable within 8 years somewhere in town. So you could build a townhouse with 2 somewhere, you build, a bunch of those, but it gives at least some flexibility to towns. So I think the governor's listening. He admits that Darien and New Canaan are making strides. Tracy did a good job of getting the governor here. That was last summer or the summer before?
It was last summer.
Yeah, last summer.
No, it wasn't, because it was just before. It was 2 years ago, because it
was
was
it?
just
Okay.
before your.
But he admits that New Canaan and Darien are making efforts, and they should reward, the state should reward good faith efforts at doing it. And look at all the building that Darien's done. So anyway, I am confident that the governor will listen and will force the majority party to listen to the Republicans.
I wanted to point out, I kind of went back and looked at some of the information I said were going to be priorities when I was even running for office again. And then to look at where we are now. One of the big ones we talked about was road safety, and I think that's still an issue. I am on the Transportation Committee. Tom is on the Transportation Committee and was ranking of that committee as well. I think we made some little steps forward. There's an increased penalty now for people going over 100 miles an hour. And we now have in law that you may pull someone over if the smell of cannabis or the sight of someone smoking cannabis is happening in an automobile. And that was a huge win.
So I used to hammer the commissioner when he would, the DOT would come in, because his big thing was, lowering the legal limit for driving while intoxicated from 0.08 to 0.05, which Utah does. And I said to him, Commissioner, tell me why it makes sense, before you do that, why somebody can smoke a joint in their car while driving and flip off a police officer and the officer can't do anything about it. So now we have finally fixed that after 4 years. So they got tired of being embarrassed by it, frankly. We made them very embarrassed about that law. So that we did get that fixed. And we also worked on some recklessness with the state workers. We've had a police officer, state trooper, get hit by a distracted driver who was intoxicated. And we had a DOT worker who got hit by an intoxicated driver who was texting while driving. So we did make some strides in increasing those penalties and putting in more cameras or expanding the number of cameras on DOT vehicles while in construction zones.
And an increased penalty too for the move over law. So if you're approaching an emergency vehicle or workers on the side, you are supposed to slow down and move over in your lanes. If you don't know that you have to do that, you're listening here and you know now you have to do that, and if you don't and you're caught, there's an increased penalty for that. The other thing that we did, and this is a little bit of a public service announcement too, we all see the bikes in town, the e-bikes, the electric bikes, the scooters, a lot of the kids are out and they're having a great time. And I really, our kids have gone through a lot. So I'm really happy to see them out and about. And there's so many of them that are being safe with this, but there are some that are not. E-bikes have changed a lot over the years, and our laws have not actually kept up with that change. So we actually went through and reclassified the bikes. Well, actually, we didn't necessarily reclassify them. It is e-bikes are with the pedals, and you can only ride them if you can ride them up to the 20 miles per hour. You have certain e-bikes that can that stop engaging at 20 miles per hour. And you could do that if you are under 16. But if it goes over 20 miles an hour, you cannot be on that bike unless you are over 16. And of note, everyone on an electric bike, everyone, every age, has to wear a helmet. Everyone. This is not just below. It is in law that everyone has to wear it. There have been infractions put on both not wearing the helmet and an infraction that has been put if you get an e-bike and you make modifications to that e-bike and it actually changes the class, there's an infraction for that. So this is just a note, parents, if you are listening, please, I almost saw your kid die today. And I do it on a regular basis. So please, if you are going to pick your battles in your house, I get it, but pick this one. I think this is an important one we see. I want the kids to keep doing it. I don't want kids to ruin it for everyone, but we just, some of the kids really have to be a little more careful.
Any question? Well, you want to talk about energy and what?
Yikes, fun. Okay, so.
Some good news.
Some good news. Look, we made a step in the right direction. It's not perfect, but the focus this year on the Energy Committee was affordability, and that wasn't just the Republicans coming forward. It was across the board. It was from the governor's office. It was from the Senate Democrats too. The focus was on affordability. So basically, what that meant is we didn't make anything worse, and we made a step in the right direction. We did a combination of bonding some charges that I'm not generally a fan of bonding. There was some proposals out there to just bond everything, which I think, these are regular charges we're putting through. It's one thing to, buy a car, buy a house, and bond it. So we have big infrastructure or big capital investments that have to be made. It makes sense to bond that. So the moratorium, cost and arrearages, we bonded up to $100 million on that. So that's good. That'll help things go down. The other thing we did is we put a means test on incentives for EV chargers. So we have incentives out there now for EV chargers, and pretty much anyone was going to be able to get them. We said that doesn't make sense. If someone's able to buy a Tesla car or whatever they're buying, they should be able to put the EV charger in their house as well. But if someone is having a little more struggles with affordability of electric cars, then those are the folks that we can help out. So that actually was a real savings. Moving forward, line by line, there are many line items in that, in your bill on the public benefits charge. And they could be things like a solar farm from 20 years ago, wind farms. There are 1 million, 2 million, whatever, along the way, in each line up to over 50 lines. We're going to have the Office of Consumer Counsel go through each of those lines and see what we can get rid of, what we can tailor back. We know that there are things that we can do in the future with green energy. So I'm not saying that this is going to be anti-green in the future, but I am saying that I think some of the things that we've already done that have piled up, and they've been like, gee, this is a really good idea, we should add this to the bill, from 20 years ago up until now, we should reassess some of those, see if we can get some better deals on those, because as you move along, technology changes. So that is to be continued. The thing I would like to note is that the legislative body is one that puts a lot on your ratepayer bill, but there are other people that can put on your ratepayer bill too. PURA, our regulatory authority, they have authority to, sometimes when we give it to them, so right now there's a medium to heavy truck EV charging that's going to be going through, and that's going to be on your ratepayer bill as well. So that's an issue because we worked so hard already to try to lower that cost, and this is coming in and may basically take away everything that we've already done with the EV chargers anyway. The other thing that can go on is the siting council. So when a siting council comes up, if there's some sort of infrastructure or it could be cell towers in this case for energy, for instance, in Fairfield, they have the monopoles out there. And there's a big group of activists that don't want these big monopoles in these historic areas. I get it, they're unsightly. Ideally, having things underground would be prettier. If that goes underground, though, that will only be for beautification, and the state of Connecticut would have to pay for it. So while we have activists working on this in Bridgeport and Fairfield, the rest of the state may end up paying for it.
So one good news, too, that Tracy and Ryan got, so we've been trying to get Pure out from under the executive branch, the thumb. So we did do that this time. Pure is going to be outside of the executive office branch. So that's very good news, frankly. And I will tell you the other good news. Dave Arconti, who used to be the chair of the Energy Committee, he's now on Pura. Dave was a moderate Dem who's a good guy, and he's pro-nuclear. So he and I used to joke all the time, go nuclear or go home. So Millstone provides about half of our energy, and if it wasn't for Dave and the Republicans a number of years ago, there was a big push to let them close, and we didn't want that to happen. Imagine what your energy costs would be if Millstone closed. It would be unbelievable. So I still defend that decision. Yes, the natural gas prices went down so low that nuclear was a little more over the last cycle. Now it's hopefully coming back, but it still is cheaper than all other energy that we can get in here. And the governor, good news is, the governor is proposing increasing natural gas pipeline into Connecticut and coordinating, and he's also talking about increasing the energy or the nuclear output by Millstone. So we passed a law a couple years ago allowing Millstone to expand. And with the governor talking about increasing, expanding natural gas, so because the last administration was anti-natural gas. Now he's talking about increasing natural gas. Obviously that's a longer term solution, but it's something.
And actually increasing nuclear, not even just at Millstone, but we have a grant, because sometimes getting site readiness for nuclear is one of the big obstacles. So we have a grant to kind of start that site readiness whenever we find a place that wants to move forward with nuclear.
It's a smaller group, so I want to make sure if there's any questions about any of the specific bills, or you want us to keep going over, we can, but I would love to hear from you all on questions you have, goals for the next session, highlights, lowlights. Over.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to repeat it, but.
Tom, you mentioned DOT and cameras on the construction vehicles. Where is DOT on overall cameras for speeding?
So we that's been a hotly debated item. We've now increased it to 13? Funding for 13 cameras on DOT vehicles. We also are allowing municipalities to put up their own speed cameras, and I think 4 said yes, 3 or 4. Not Darien and not New Canaan.
No.
But I want to say, was it Westport? But there's a couple municipalities in Fairfield County that are putting them up. As a test basis kind of a deal. But so DOT, I was opposed to speed cameras forever until, frankly, the police accountability bill in 2020, where we made it very difficult for police officers to defend themselves in court for lawsuits. And somebody who spent 15 years defending state and municipal police in excessive force, false arrest type claims as a lawyer, we made it, we decreased the ability of the police to do active policing, or we encouraged them not to do it. So, and we've all witnessed the cars speeding in and out of traffic, causing havoc, and the police are told they can't pursue. So seeing record deaths on our highways and roadways over the last few years, I've changed my mind on speed cameras. And you can set them, I think they're set right now, most of them at 10 miles over the speed limit. So you won't get it, if you're going 9 miles or less over the speed limit, they won't take your picture. It's not going after you. But frankly, I've changed my mind. So I will tell you, I was always a no on them, but now I'm a yes because of the number of deaths on our roadways, and people and the police are not being supported, so they're not pulling people over. And so I'm a yes on them. I actually haven't had this conversation with Tracy, but I don't know if you've changed your mind. So now I've supported putting them on the DOT vehicles in construction zones so that they can help make sure their workers are protected. And now if municipalities are allowed the option, I'm letting each municipality decide if they want to have them. It's up to you locally. And frankly, I'm okay with them on the highways now.
Yeah.
I have a question on this police aspect of the cameras. How do you think the cameras taking pictures of speeding helps them, with what you were referencing, with safer, they're afraid to arrest people. Isn't that something that's just going to go in the mail because they had a speeding ticket from the camera?
So yeah, it's going to be mailed. Yes.
Yeah.
So you have to have a person review it. So it'll be reviewed. If they can see the vehicle, they confirm the license. They send a picture to the person. The person can appeal that, go to court, and say it wasn't me or whatever it is, and you just go to court and you argue it. If the question is how will that help? Just look at what red light cameras have done on, like on my Waze. It says speed camera approaching, not in Connecticut. I guess it will come, but when I see on my Waze that there's a speed camera, just automatically I look down and I check and make sure I'm going, within a certain number of the speed. So it works on me, and from what all the studies have said, the speed cameras do work. And if everybody knew that if they go past a construction vehicle and there's a speed camera on it, like buses, once we put, most buses now have, if not all, I know Darien and Canaan has them, cameras on the side of buses. There used to be a problem of people passing school buses. Well, now I think it's 250 or 500. It's a huge penalty and points and everything. Very few people are passing school buses now because you're on camera. I think once people realize that every DOT construction truck, and that's what I said, I want it on every truck, has a speed camera on it, I'll bet you people slow down eventually. And then the tickets will go out, and if you claim it wasn't me, or that's not my license, or I wasn't on that road, you go fight it, and you can win.
And it is supposed to be a deterrent. That is the first thing, even like with the red light cameras that municipalities can have. The idea is it's supposed to be a deterrent too.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that you said the police accountability bill was why you turned on the cameras, and I'm not really, I guess, understanding how the cameras are protecting
good question.
police.
So because what happened was the number of police stops, pullovers, decreased dramatically by almost 50% after the police accountability bill. And the question and everybody was asking, well, why did that happen? So the police accountability bill, first of all, it said you can't have a consent search. So what does that mean? The majority of illegal guns and drugs were confiscated on consent searches on highways. So you get pulled over for speeding and the cop will see something, he'll say, do you mind if I search your car? And believe it or not, even criminals said yes. And they would search the car and they'd find illegal drugs. Believe it or not, that's how they got most illegal guns and drugs. So we got rid of consent searches. So even if somebody consents to a search, cops aren't allowed to. That doesn't make any sense. So we took away the consent searches. That's still not allowed. So if I pull you over for speeding, I give you a ticket, and I see what appears to be drug paraphernalia on the floor, and I say, can I search your car? You can say no, and then I'd have to get a warrant in order to search your car. But if you said yes, then I can search your car, I can find the illegal drugs or whatever, weapons. So what was happening was after the police accountability bill, the number of police pullovers decreased. We also had a hard time recruiting police. Do you know we now only have 870. We had 1,200 police officers in the 90s, state troopers. We now only have 800 and change. How many police officers do you think there are state troopers on the Merritt from the Sikorsky Bridge to Greenwich assigned per day? 2. for the entire length of the merit from Sikorsky to Greenwich. That's not enough. So we've got a staffing problem. So your point, I hear you, and you're right. The correlation I make is we passed the police accountability bill, which discouraged police from pulling people over, and we have a hard time getting police to serve. Between that and we have a lower number of police officers. We even got rid of the test. We got rid of the written test. So we've got a problem with numbers of police officers and getting them to pull people over. That's what I'm referring to.
Sure, and I understand like it betters traffic, it does enforce better, speeding, but just would recommend, you kind of don't conflate the issues because it's not, they're not giving the speeding tickets based on the cameras as you mentioned. So yeah.
When you say conflate the issues.
The police accountability bill and the installment of speeding cameras and traffic lights.
I think maybe you misunderstood.
Yeah.
We had previously, well, I shouldn't speak for Tom, but he previously wasn't in support of necessarily having the cameras.
Yeah.
But considering now that with the loss of qualified immunity, the decrease in the amount of police that we had, the decrease in pullovers, it seemed like a good idea that now you can, maybe if we have the speed, because we aren't having the police pull people over, now you've got the speed cameras that can work to kind of not pull people over, but find people when they're going. Does that make sense?
A little bit, and then I'm just listening to what you're saying and responding, and I think it is interesting that we have discussions about privacy. It's an issue for everybody. I think everybody in this room, would want the safety of the roads, but also there is a real concern about Google and Apple and everybody watching over our back.
Big brother, I hear you.
So
you're not wrong.
It's when we have these issues and we install these cameras, I, as a citizen, I want to make sure that I'm really kind of understanding what our metrics of success are. So I think police recruitment, to your point, you're saying that the police are not doing these pullovers. They don't really seem involved in this unless they're shipping out the bills afterwards from the cameras. I think it's, if you want to say it's part of a larger traffic agenda, sure. But I think
that
the
makes
police
sense.
accountability bill just didn't really sit right with me, so I appreciate the discussion on it.
Yeah.
I got to say I'm not with you on the speeding cameras at all. I think that you're solving for the wrong problem. There's a YouTube culture out there where these kids, young adults, hop up cars and weave in out of traffic very dangerously. I know New York City does not pursue those, but they can still get a license plate off a police cruiser. And instead of solving for that problem, you're putting Big Brother in place on our highways. You're blaming it on a bill that the legislature passed. I spent 22 years in law enforcement, and stripping out consent search is just, why don't you repeal that bill instead of...
I've tried.
This stuff?
We've tried. I've been trying to repeal that since 2020. We argued on the floor.
I hear you, Tom, but I got to say, I think it's way over the top, Big Brother. And even you had a good point about the marijuana. Not a fan, of course, at all. But how, in practical reality, does a cop drive past someone and say, that's not a cigarette, that's a marijuana joint?
I'm sorry, say that again? How
so if you're
in
going to
practice?
let police pull people over for smoking a joint while driving,
Yeah.
how is a cop supposed to tell at 50 miles an hour
They
at
can't.
sunset that...
Yeah, no, they can't. I agree with you. No, the point is that, but they could if they're right at the intersection
Sure.
and they're stopped. Up until this year, they could, even if, hey, you can say, hey, cop, do you want some of my pot? And the cop, what are you doing? And he's,
I get that. Yeah, that I support that.
so we fixed that.
But
And I hear you about Big Brother
on the other
on
side.
the speed cameras. I hear you. Listen.
And wasn't there an article in the Darien Times about a local municipality? I was really taken aback at how much money they raised off the speed. It was either a speed or a stoplight camera that they installed.
The red light cameras, and they are not supposed to have a line item for that because it is supposed to be a deterrent.
But this was a small town, and I think they got
may
like
have put it in there.
$20,000
I'm-
off their. I always look at it. It's kind of a hidden tax. That's 20,000 off your own citizens, you know, because who drives past a stoplight camera? The people in the town 99% of the time. Of course,
I hear
outsiders.
you, and they probably should be reassessed for where it is, because it is truly supposed to be.
That's all I
Yeah,
just.
no.
I don't disagree with anything you said.
Yeah.
And I didn't come to my change, and listen, ask my wife, I'm wrong all the time. And I could be wrong, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm seeing our deaths on our roadways increasing, and I'm trying to figure out ways. So the average speed on our highways went up 10 miles per hour, 15 in one study during COVID, because it just did, right? It hasn't come back down yet. And speed is what's killing. That's one of the reasons, you know, you get in a car accident going 55, 60, 65 even, you're most likely going to survive. You get in an accident, somebody's going 85, you're mostly going to die. And it's just that big of a difference. So to your point, I'm not arguing with either one of your points. I think, I frankly agree with that. I'm trying to figure out ways to make our roadways safer, and I'll rethink it again.
Flip it up.
Push the button maybe up.
I usually hold my tongue. Sorry, at this moment I'm going to share.
Please.
Sorry. I was coming home last Thursday night, had done a road trip to New Hampshire, plenty of out-of-state driving.
I was doing the same thing, coming from New Hampshire from a wedding.
Bridgeport to exit 11, got off at 10 o'clock at night because the light changed to flashing as we were sitting at it. We were almost struck in the Bridgeport to here section with a speeding car in the 9:30 realm, zipped so close, and I have a Tahoe, I'm not one for driving a small car, zipped so close to my fender I could have reached out and touched it, went around the car that was in the fast lane, I was in the middle, and almost clipped them. 95 lower, what do we have? 18-wheelers at all hours of the day, different sized cars, and this was a small car. So I'm taking the side of thank you. Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's not something that's in for years, but thank you for doing speed cameras on the highway, especially in this lower band, because that's where the problem is.
Well, and I think adding in the over 100 mile an hour is good. We need an extra deterrent there. That's how fast he was going. That's how fast you see like the danger increases when they get to that speed.
But to address that too, it's a broader picture, right? The youth, we proposed a number of things to address. So in Waterbury, there's basically 30 youth that are basically perpetrating 85% of the thefts, right? They're just repeat. And they're getting paid $500 a car because the guys know that the youth are just going to be let go. And so we proposed a number of things to address that. From the youth gets tried from the area where the car was stolen, not where they live. Okay, so the jury of their peers where they live, like a kid from Waterbury stealing a car from Darien, the Waterbury jury pool probably is treating them differently than a Darien jury pool may, or Stanford. So that was one of the ideas we had. Ankle, now I know, again, big brother, but I give the example, when my kids were in high school, they knew, and the friends knew, that we had cameras at the house, in the exterior, not the interior. And so the O'Days were away for the weekend in New Hampshire for a wedding, for example. Well, you can't party at the O'Days house because they have cameras. So my kids had an easy out on hosting a party in high school. And I bring that up simply because if the kid, so some of these minors are being pressured to do crime by these older gentlemen. We increased it to a felony now. If you encourage someone to commit car theft, even if it's below a certain amount, that's a felony. So that's another way we've addressed that. So, but the ankle bracelets, so we've had mothers testify that they wouldn't be opposed to, if my son has a second or third offense for stealing a car, put an ankle bracelet on him, then the adult doesn't want a kid with an ankle bracelet doing the theft because they can see where they're going to take the car, and the chop shop is going to get caught. So I think there's a lot of different things we can do. I sound like I'm a big brother advocate. I'm not. I actually hate the idea, but it's something we're looking at to try and decrease these kids stealing cars, because it's a problem. It's a big problem.
Hi. Sorry, I'm late. Thank you for being here. I have a question that sort of dovetails a little bit with the traffic law enforcement sort of angle. We know cell phones, whether you're dealing with small children and distractibility or you're driving a car, not a good combination. So I was pleased to see or understand recently that the New Canaan Police Department, I believe, on a special grant from the state, was doing unique work in that capacity, looking particularly for drivers who were distracted due to cell phone usage. So I commend you all on that. I guess I would look for a little more information on that. How's that funded? What bill is that wrapped into? But when I consider that and what a good idea that is to try and increase safety and decrease accidents, fatalities, what have you, I'm sort of pondering, why are we not empowering our law enforcement a little more to pull people over that are actively smoking marijuana while driving? To me, that's the ultimate distractibility, and I don't understand the incongruence in terms of application and what the police can and cannot do. So, thank you.
So we did pass that this year.
And we were talking about that just before you came in.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
No,
it's all good.
But it's good to say it again so everybody hears it. That was a good win for us, and you're right, that's been such an issue. I mean, you could be driving down 95 and you could smell a car that passes you hotboxing, and the police couldn't pull them over, and now they can. It is in law. It's very clearly stated. The police wanted this. We wanted this. There was some argument whether they could or they couldn't. The police were very clear that they couldn't. So we made it clear that they can now.
And the distracted driving, I believe it was a grant that they got through the state. I think it was only like $5,000 or $10,000. It wasn't a big grant. It was a small grant. But if you just look to your right and left driving on the highway, 40%, 50% of the people are distracted. Now, I know Elon Musk is a hot button topic. I just got a Tesla because of the self-drive. So driving back and forth from Hartford, Tracy used to call me to make sure I wasn't falling asleep because I'm one of the older men. But anyway, but I have a problem. 2 o'clock in the morning, I have a hard time staying awake. So Tracy would call me.
2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So, but now with this Tesla, it is the self-drive capability is amazing, like crazy good. But distracted driving is the biggest problem, and the police will admit it, and they see it all the time. So I encourage everybody to get $40 dash cam. So when I do a lot of trucking defense work, the dash cams save millions of dollars in litigation costs from people seeing on video actually what happens and driving into trucks because they've fallen asleep, they're distracted. So I would encourage you all to get the $40 dash cam because it'll save you a lot of money.
I'll just say one last thing. There was many of you know that pharmacy is my background. I was asked to be co-chair of a prescription drug task force that we started back well before session started, and it was myself, Senator Gordon, who's in the Senate Republicans, and he's also a physician, as well as Senator Lesser and Representative Gilchrist, who are both chairs of the Human Services Committee. And we had, quite the task force, and it was a lot of work and pretty quick. But the idea is many things when it comes to prescription drugs are out of our hands because they're at the federal level, the pricing. But we wanted to be able to do what we could at the state level, find out where we could find those levers at the state level to bring some transparency to prescription drugs and that vertical integration of insurance with the PBMs. So 2 minutes before the end of session, the Senate passed the bill. It's just a step forward, but it's going to add a little bit of transparency to understand that vertical integration. It also, and I know some people go a little cuckoo over this, it starts the process, which is federally allowed, was put in actually by Trump, and then also there was more to it that was done also by Biden, so this was a bipartisan kind of initiative to allow states to be able to import U.S. federally approved drugs through wholesalers in Canada. And it's a very big process that you have to go through because our regulations are very strict. It's a track and trace where you have to know the step of the manufacturing of the drug all along the way. Right now Florida can do it but has not started it, and we're going to start the process here in Connecticut. It may not work, it may not be the best thing for us, but my hope is that it pushes some pressure on some of the pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies and wholesalers that maybe we can leverage a little bit better price for some of our drugs.
And that's on page 20, and Tracy's underselling herself, 7192, and she was awesome in that, so well done. PBMs are evil in my humble opinion. Hopefully there's no PBM guys here, but ladies. Anything? There's a lot in our, I will tell you one of the highlights is our special ed. If you look at page 22, special ed has been a huge problem. And I will say I've been trying for 10 years to get school choice passed. Still trying to do it. We are making some inroads in increasing the funding for charter schools. The number one school in test scores in the state, or number two, is the Stanford School of Excellence. It's a charter school. So we're trying to convince friends of ours on the other side of the aisle to mimic that model and increase school choice. But the bill, which you look on page 22, the special ed, it puts forth funding to help schools keep the special ed in district. The biggest expense for many school districts is when they're required to send students out of district. Particularly, I mean, there are some schools set up specifically for, and they charge over $100,000, and it's just an expense that schools. So helping schools get the funding to be able to do good special ed in district makes a lot of sense.
And we have a lot of people in Darien that have been active in this conversation because there's a lot of nuances. And at the end of the day, what we know is we need to make sure that all kids are educated, and trying to find a way forward to do that best in the state of Connecticut is tricky when you don't have the state government funding it, because then it relies on property taxes and puts a strain on budgets all around. So we need to do a better job at the state making sure that this gets funded. And we will continue to work on that.
May I ask a question? Change the topic.
Yeah.
On energy, you mentioned, and I tried to follow what you were saying about electric bills and bonding. So a piece of our electric bill is going to be bonded, which just means we're going to take it to the market and take a loan basically against that part of the bill. Is that an ongoing part of the bill, or is that we pay this once and it's done forever?
That's just for the moratorium. That was one of the issues that we had, that Ryan Fazio and I kind of stood strong on it. This was going to be a recurring charge. We don't want to bond that.
Right.
And that was...
It would be like using your credit card to pay your mortgage, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that was the one-time piece with that.
And then
that was, to be clear, Connecticut was the last state in the country to allow people not to pay their electric bill during COVID. And so that's simply, so that's simply the bond, that cost, so that it doesn't go to all the ratepayers.
And you mentioned that on PURA, you removed control of PURA out of the executive branch and put it back in the legislative branch.
No. So what happened was, so years ago, Department of Environment and Energy were combined. And what happened was, over the last 10 years in particular, DEEP, the commissioner, has been tough on fossil fuels. Let's cut right to the chase. And they were putting influence, or some of us believe putting the thumb on the scale a little bit, on PURA to encourage at cost to the ratepayers unfairly more push towards green energy, which I'm fine with, but do it in the market. Don't force it, all of us. Grandma in Stamford shouldn't pay for Tom O'Day's free Tesla charging in New Canaan under any circumstances. And unfortunately, what was happening was policy decisions were being forced on PURA and from the executive branch because they were under the commissioner. PURA was, so we've taken PURA out from that. So PURA now is not under the deep commissioner anymore. So, and we've added, so instead of there being, there's always been, well, not always, but there's 5 members, but there's only been 3 selected. So 3 people have been on PURA board. There should be 5. So we've got 2 more coming on board. So there'll be 5 members of PURA, and they'll be outside from the deep commissioner.
Be a standalone agency, or
Yes.
quasi-independent as.
They'll be sharing administrative staff, but they will not be under deep control, if that makes
For
sense.
administrative purposes only. So the idea is that they won't have the environmental pressures. They are going to be set in their own agenda as a regulatory authority, which is what they should be doing.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Any other questions?
And I will say, just before you go, too, thank you so much for coming, honestly. You know, Connecticut, and I give this credit to the majority, unlike D.C., which I call dysfunctional central, Connecticut is 85% bipartisan. Now, the 15, and I joke, if you can't get a Yankee Republican to vote for your bill in Hartford, it's a bad bill. Okay, and so, and I've talked to the governor about it, I've talked to the majority leader, I've talked to the speaker who I'm friendly with, and he gets it. So you should be happy that we're in Connecticut from a legislative body because we do get along 85% of the time we agree. I don't agree 85% of the time with my wife. So the fact that we work together in Connecticut is a good thing. Now, we disagree on some pretty big things, but compromise happens in Connecticut. It doesn't happen in D.C. enough, but it happens in Connecticut. So no matter what side of the aisle you're on, I think you can be proud of your legislative body in Connecticut 85% of the time.
All right. Thank you all.